Now we're live.
All right. What's kicking, everybody? We are back for another episode of Pickin' Fights. I'm Keith, joined as always by my good friend Tom. Tom, how are you tonight, bro?
Keith, I'm feeling good. We got UFC back. I will only allow the UFC to take a week off if we got a fantastic holiday like Memorial Day weekend. I had beers, I had burgers, I had dogs, there was a pool. No UFC fights, but I think we have 10 straight weeks of fights upcoming, so I'll forgive them this time. How you doing?
Those are going to be incredible nights of fights too. I'm really looking forward to some of these cards that we have upcoming, especially the month of July. That month of July is absolutely stacked. It's going to be bananas. So it's good that we had this weekend off because it gives us time to really, get back into that mode, delve into those July cards and, everything else that we have coming forward. And we also have Shane joining us tonight. He's over at Oddball MMA on Twitter. Make sure you follow him. How you doing tonight, Shane?
Hey, just happy to be here, and thanks again for having me on. I'm excited, like you guys. I'm excited to see some more UFC this weekend, and after a week layoff. So let's get into it.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you here, and make sure if you're watching this right now that you please like this video, comment anything that you have for us down below in the comments section, and subscribe to us on YouTube at Pickin' Winners. Also follow all of our Twitters. Subscribe to the main pages, Instagram @_PickinWinners, @_PickinWinners on Twitter. So with all that being said, we're going to dive in now to this pretty good card, headlined by Alexander Volkov and Jarzhino Rozenstruik. But we're going to start, as we always do, with our prelim locks. So I'm just going to kick it off with my two prelim locks real quick. And number one is Erin Blanchfield by decision. A little bit of a heavy favorite in this fight, but I don't think it's a very good matchup for her opponent, J.J. Aldrich. J.J. Aldrich is a little bit more of a stand-up fighter, but Erin Blanchfield, she just rips takedowns. And she's been able to use them really well, pretty recently. She keeps control from the top. And we all know that women's fights are really heavily scored based on control time from the top. If there's a lot of wrestling going on in that fight, not so much damage. And Erin Blanchfield was able to do this against Miranda Maverick. That's mainly her most notable UFC opponent so far, the Maverick. And she's pretty solid young competition as well. And Erin Blanchfield was able to, control her from the top. And Miranda Maverick is really, she's pretty good on the ground. She's a pretty decent wrestler. So impressive for Erin Blanchfield, taking her by decision in this one. And then I also have Jeff Molina as my other prelim lock. He's going up against Zaglas Zumagulov. I believe I said that correctly, but if not, sorry. Zaglov. So Jeff Molina uses good kicks, a lot of front kicks, teep kicks. He has a really nice snappy jab, and he uses all those to manage distance on his opponent. And he is the bigger guy coming into this one. He has a few inches in reach advantage here, so that'll help him manage distance even more. Zaglas. Okay.
Kind of like Douglas, but with a Z.
Yeah. All right. That's a good way to put it. Zuglas. If Zuglas does go, I'm going to say it like that from now on. Douglas with a Z. It's now Zuglas. If Zuglas does go for takedowns, Molina is pretty smart when it comes to, scooting his ass back up against the cage, and trying to stand up, or creating scrambles in which he's really good at getting himself free in. So, I like Molina's chances against Zuglas on the ground. He's got Jeff Molina. He's got a pretty good chin, and he's got pretty decent fight IQ. So I like to see him, trying to keep this up on his feet for the majority of the fight. And if Zuglas does take him down, scooting back up to the cage, creating a scramble, getting out of there. What do you think of those picks, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, women's fights for me, I'm going to stay away from women's fights in terms of calling them locks. I know traditionally and historically you've been really good at that. Why don't I make myself a little bit bigger here so the people can see me in my giant freaking black glasses? Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, I'm going to stay away from calling women's fights locks, but I know that you somehow are the woman whisperer, both for fights and maybe outside of the fights. But
Hey,
that being said, I really like your secondary pick, El Jefe. I was really, really impressed with his most recent win. He has really good stand-up. He's going to have the reach advantage here. He's improving a lot all the time. Like I said, he got an easy win over Daniel De Silva, which I guess didn't really age great after he lost to the lesser of the he's the lesser brother. He is the lesser Figueiredo, or he fought the lesser Figueiredo and he lost. Either way, I think Jeff has a really good chin. He's got a takedown defense that's really, really strong. He's got the ability to get up, and he's really solid all around. Jeff has really active kicks too. And Zaglas, he's more of a grappling heavy guy. And I think Jeff has what it takes to fight off any grappling that Zaglas is going to have for him and be able to piece him up on the feet. I see this one actually probably finishing for Jeff Molina here. My next prelim lock, I'm going to stay with the hot hand. Hopefully it continues to be the hot hand. If I pick a fighter and then they retweet and say, yeah, you should, or something like that, I have to pick him. It worked last time with Ugly Man Joe Holmes. It's working this time with Damon Jackson. Damon, thanks for the love on Twitter. Over at OTH MMA, we did an interview with him, Danny Podolsky. Make sure you check us out over at OTH MMA. But we did an interview with Damon Jackson. He was talking about how difficult it was to find a fight for him after Derek Binner pulled out. And basically, they went through a list of people who were in the UFC, and they all turned it down. They had to shuffle over to the list of guys that they were thinking about bringing onto the UFC, and they finally landed on, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, but they finally landed on the guy who accepted the fight, who is taking this fight up a weight class on short notice for his UFC debut. That's like the trifecta of bad things you don't want to happen that's statistically not worked out for you in the UFC to get a win. So for all of those reasons, and on top of it, Damon Jackson is, he's really well-rounded. He's got some good wins in the past. He doesn't really get the credit he deserves. He's a longer guy. He uses his volume. He's adept at grappling. He's got a handful of submissions inside the UFC. He's got KO victories outside the UFC. I like Damon Jackson a lot to get the finish here. He was in the UFC previously, got knocked out, had a ton of success in LFA, went to PFL, talked shit about PFL over at OTH MMA, went back to LFA, got another win over there. Now he's in the UFC, and he's been on a tear. I think his only loss is to Ilia Topuria, which, hey, that's forgivable at this point in time. So with all that being said, I really like Damon Jackson. I have one more, but before I go for that one more, Shane/Oddball, Keith, does anyone have any other prelim locks that they want to share with the people?
No, but I do really like that Damon Jackson pick. And, just to help you out here, the guy that he's fighting is named Daniel Argueta.
Dan Argueta, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan. Apologize, but I probably said a lot more hurtful things than forgetting your name there.
Yeah, but I like that pick quite a bit. Shane, do you have any more picks, or do you have any prelim locks for us?
You know what? The one guy I have at this point, and I told you guys this before, that coming off of Memorial Day weekend, I'm was busy this week, catching in the emails and stuff. So I haven't really had time or as much time as I would like to look at the card and kind of, do my own research there. But the only one I have locked in right now is St. Denis. I was watching the boxing last weekend with Gervonta Davis and what's that guy's name? Rolly.
Mm-hmm.
Roly Poly. So I had to throw a parlay on St. Denis just to get that extra odds advantage there. So that's all.
All right.
For the prelims.
All right. Well, I got one more for the people at home, and it's going to be Joe Solecki taking on Alex De Silva, and I like Joe Solecki to get the win here. I mean, at the end of the day, Joe Solecki has he's a really, really, really good grappler. We've seen that in previous fights. I mean, he's coming off the loss against Jared Gordon, and hey, it was a split decision, and I thought Joe Solecki had won that fight. Nevertheless, out wrestling, out grappling Jim Miller, out grappling Austin Hubbard, getting that one by submission, rear naked choke. Unanimous decision wins over Matt Whitman. He's been in the UFC for a little bit, got a guillotine choke to get into the UFC over James Wallace. So I like a lot of things about Joe Solecki and what he brings to this fight. Alex De Silva, he's coming off a loss to Brad Riddell, in which Brad Riddell is a really good fighter, but he's not known as a heavy grappler, and he was able to out-grapple Alex De Silva. Brad Riddell, by the way, that was a year and 8 months ago, so almost a 2-year layoff for Alex De Silva here. And he's got a win against Rodrigo Vargas, but then he's got a loss by submission to Alexander Yakovlev. And just for those reasons, he's a younger guy, but taking all that time off, especially in the youth of your career, I don't know how good that's going to be for your output. And then just taking a look at the votes on Tapology, of the 1,600 votes, 81% are taking Joe Solecki by 81% are taking Joe Solecki, 73% are taking him by decision here. So I like Joe Solecki a lot. I could potentially see Joe Solecki finishing this one, but just going to call him to get the win as my prelim lock. So between me, Jeff, and Shane, we gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prelim locks to hopefully make you some money. I'll lay it down right now. 60 to 80% of those are going to hit, guaranteed.
Did you just call me Jeff?
No.
Oh, okay. I could have sworn I heard you call me Jeff. Anyways.
I might have. Listen, hey, it's 9 o'clock. I'm usually in bed by 8:30. I'm staying up into the wee hours of the morning here to record this for the people. If I called you Jeff, I'm sorry. It was out of love because we were just talking about Jeff Molina. I'm high on Jeff Molina. So between me, Shane, and Keith,
I'm staying out of it.
We got you 5 picks here.
Well, I will say, though, I really like the Joe Solecki pick here, and you couldn't have said it better because it is going to be a big grappling matchup. And, if De Silva could not out-grapple Brad Riddell, he's not going to be able to out-grapple Joe Solecki, who out-grappled Cowboy, and Cowboy is decent enough at grappling. I mean, in his old age, it's a little bit tough. And Jim Miller, who is known to be a great grappler and jiu-jitsu guy. So Joe Solecki definitely has that one. And that's all Jeff has to say about that. So now I think we can move it on up to the main card, right? We're all ready? All right. So first off, we've got Alonzo Menifield versus Askar Mozharov. I can never get those Eastern European names correctly. But, you were saying some interesting things about this one before we jumped on, Tom. So I'm going to pass this one over to you first.
All right, no problem. So thanks for passing it off to me, Jeff. Alonzo Menifield, he's got issues of his own, but he's been in the UFC for a few years now. But Askar is really, really bizarre. This is a guy who's fought at 170, 185, 205, 265. He's fought bare knuckle. We don't normally see guys fight in bare knuckle in the middle of their career and they go back to just regular mixed martial arts. He's been signed by many different promotions, but fought for very few of them. He's been signed by the UFC for almost over a year. Had 2 fights fall out, finally coming in. He's saying he had visa issues. He had injury issues. Something I'm learning as I get into these and as I start to actually interview and communicate with some fighters. Shout out Damon Jackson again. As he was talking to Danny Podesky over on OTH MMA, he was saying that he really thought that Derek Minner was going to pull out. He actually called that Derek Minner was going to pull out because he thought it was a very terrible matchup for Derek Minner. And then what do you know? Derek Minner pulls out with an alleged injury or an alleged concussion, right? So at the end of the day, we're learning that sometimes fighters will pull out and not be totally truthful about why they're pulling out. So a lot of bizarre things surrounding Askar Mozharov. In addition to the fact that he apparently had lied about some of his losses, they counted as wins. Tapology had to go back and change them. He's got a Conor McGregor gorilla on his chest. He's got a giant neck tattoo. This guy he's just a very bizarre creature coming into the UFC. I've watched a couple of his fights and a little bit of his highlights. He's like that guy who wins a bunch of bar fights, starts training MMA and thinks he's the baddest guy in the world, and then goes out, loses to a couple decent people, and then starts padding his record. If you look back at Tapology, he's got a lot of people, and I encourage everyone to go do this. My computer's a little bit too slow to allow me to jump back and forth this time. That's why I'm going to make some verbal issues like calling Keith Jeff. So at the end of the day, Askar Mozharov has a lot of weirdness surrounding him. you guys in the UFC, I think they shout out Enfuego. I think he said guys making their UFC debut are something like 17 and 27 so far in 2022. So it hasn't gone statistically well for them lately. And I just like Alonzo Menifield. You know, he's where are my notes here? I think he's got the experience inside of the UFC to manage anything too wild that Askar is going to be throwing at him. Again, Askar likes to throw looping punches, and if he connects, he can knock you out. But at the end of the day, his padded record and his knockouts are coming from a lot of people who don't have very many wins, if any MMA fights at all. So very questionable for Askar, Mozharov, Alonzo Menifield. We've seen him fight a bunch of different people inside of the UFC. He's got some wins. He's got some losses. He's got a knockout win over Paul Craig, so the Bear Jew. So at the end of the day, like, I just have to put my vote into the side of experience with Alonzo Menifield. I'll pass it over to you, Shane.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I was going to bring that up, that Alonzo does have that first round KO over Paul Craig in the first round. So, yeah, definitely looking at him. He's definitely a lock for me. And again, just to reiterate, your Askar Mozharov, you know, this is a guy who changed his name because, I don't know, I heard he murdered somebody back in his home country. So, I don't know. It's just a shady deal there. And I'm going with my boy Alonzo Menifield over there for that one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with you guys on this one as well. And it is a little bit strange to me that Alonzo Menifield is only a minus 160 favorite in this one, considering the level of experience between the two men. You know, and Askar Mozharov, we're talking all about him right now because we all know who Alonzo Menifield is, right? We mentioned his history. But I think the big question here is, who is Askar Mozharov? I mean, Tapology has him ranked as the #1 heavyweight in Ukraine, except for the fact that Mozharov, he fought in the Chinese regional scene. And, you know, we mentioned this padded record, but that seems to be where the majority of his fights came from. And, you know, the Chinese regional scene isn't exactly known for the best competition. They take a lot of these guys from other countries and try to, you know, build them up against guys, you know, that just really suck at MMA over there in China. And I think that's, you know, who this guy Askar has been fighting his whole career. Alonzo Menifield is a massive step up in competition. And yeah, our good friend in Fuego over there, he's been keeping track of people making, or of UFC fighters making their debut in 2022. That number was something like 17 and 27, and it keeps going. You know, the L column keeps getting stacked up week by week. So I think that for Askar Mozharov, he's going to be another L as a UFC fighter making their debut. I'm glad to see we're all going with Alonzo Menifield here. Good guy, good fighter. So now we're going to move up to the next fight on this card, which is Osbourne versus Zarrukh Adashev. And I'm going with Osbourne here. He's the better fighter in this fight. You know, I think he can outstrike Zarrukh. And Zarrukh likes to stay at range, try to piece guys apart, but he won't be able to do that here because there's a whopping 8-inch reach advantage here for Osbourne, another guy that likes to pick people apart. has solid combinations from range, and he's used his range well before. I think that this card Saturday night is going to be a good showing and a possibly dominating win for Osbourne. Just like I said, piecing Zarrukh up at range and winning by a solid decision. Osbourne has gotten caught by stuff before, but I think the range is going to be a big factor going into this one. You know, say Zarrukh does try to rush in and land anything wild on Osbourne. Ode's got a good snapping jab, and, you know, he'll probably end up catching Zarrukh with one of those before Zarrukh can land anything too crazy. Zarrukh's record is 4-3, and I do believe that he is better than his record would indicate, but there is a vast level of experience between the two men. And, yeah, Osbourne seems like a really solid pick in this one. So let me know what you think about that one, Tom.
Thank you, Jeff. At the end of the day, it's not often that you see in the 125-pound division an 8-inch reach advantage, let alone in all of MMA. You know, 8 inches is an insanely big reach advantage. But the way that Osbourne uses it, sometimes it can be an advantage, and sometimes it can be a disadvantage. Like if somebody, you know, has a long reach, but they don't know how to use it, and then it allows their opponent to get in on the inside. Well, it's really hard then to throw some shots from the inside when your arms are so long. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem here because both of these guys are strikers. And, I heard Zarrukh kind of described as somebody who is like if like Tyreek Hill played basketball is what I heard the comparison as. Where there's probably a lot of skills that will translate, but it's still not a guy doing his own sport. He's a fighter or a striker that's doing MMA. So it's going to be an interesting fight. It probably will end up being a boring fight if Osbourne can use his reach and keep Zarrukh kind of more backed up against the cage. He can land good boxing combinations, but there's also a slight chance that he just gets on his horse and stays away for the entire length of the fight. That being said, both these guys started the UFC around the same, or not the UFC, but started MMA around the same time. But there is a stark contrast to the amount of fights each of them had. So for experience, for the reach advantage, and because it's 125 pounds, I'm going to have to go with Osbourne. He's going to be the bigger guy in the cage, and if he doesn't have a problem with the weight, I think he's going to get this one done by decision.
Shane, what do you got?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to let this one go for now.
Okay.
All right.
Well, you let us know what you're thinking later on. So then we'll move up to Poliana Botelho versus Karine Silva. And this is actually one of the tougher fights for me to pick on this card because, like we spoke about, UFC fighters making their debut in 2022 are having quite a tough time. But, Silva, she's pretty good. And Poliana Botelho is on a 2-fight losing streak. Silva seems to have really good submissions. And she has a history of finishes throughout her career. Great Brazilian jiu-jitsu overall. And Poliana Botelho's loss to Cynthia Calvillo in that fight, she gave up her back pretty easily, losing by rear naked choke. And if she makes decisions like that against, this newcomer, Karine Silva, she's going to have a really rough night. She's going to end up getting a limb or her neck snatched. So I actually see Karine Silva potentially submitting Poliana Botelho, being, so we've seen a little bit of a trend where, maybe if they put 3 fighters on a card that are making their debut in one night, usually one of them wins, and I think that Karine Silva is going to be the one to do it, potentially submitting Poliana Botelho, putting her into some uncomfortable positions, forcing Poliana Botelho to make bad decisions and, snatching something up. So what do you think about that one, Tom?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think there's maybe 3. I know there's at least 3, maybe 4 fighters making their UFC debut on this card, and I agree with you. I think Silva is going to be one of them that ends up getting the win. Right? They can't all lose, otherwise no one's going to ever make a debut. I think Silva. I don't think she is absolutely jacked. She has explosive power. She's finished 14 of her 14 fights, and that's not something we're typically talking about with women's MMA. I think Botelho, she's more of a lanky fighter. She's not much of a finisher. She has been finished in the past. Sylvia's younger. She's going to come out fast. She's hungry. She's aggressive. She's looking to make a stamp. She's, like I said, got a ton of finishes. Maybe Poliana Botelho is going to be able to avoid that onslaught and push it into the later rounds and potentially turn this into a little bit more of a boring fight that ends, in the second, or it doesn't end, but ends by going to the judges. But for my money, I'm going to put it on Sylvia to get the win. Karine Silva in her UFC debut. Shane, do you have any opinions on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Silva on this one as well. I mean, you're right about all the finishes she has on her record. And it's her debut. She's excited. She's going to come out hot. So definitely going to be an exciting fight to start. But, there's always the chance that she could come out swinging, and then maybe Botelho puts up a little bit of defense she wasn't expecting. Maybe she prepared for that, and she could gas herself out. So like you said, we could end up seeing a boring fight, but definitely an explosive start. And just going off of her record, I would say Silva for the win here.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Maybe Silva gasses herself out going for the submission too hard. And we have no fighters that make debuts on this weekend. Or one surprises us because we do have another fight coming up next that is another fighter making his debut this weekend, and that would be Lucas Almeida. And, he lost in the Contender Series. So he's fighting Mike Trizano, by the way. Lucas Almeida lost in the Contender Series. It's quite a jump in competition for a guy like him. Then he had a win over at, I believe, Jungle Fight is the name of the promotion. And, it was an impressive win over there. But Mike Trizano has the abilities and the skills that got him through tough. That's the Ultimate Fighter for anybody watching out there and is not familiar.
Nobody's watching tough, Keith.
Yeah, well, especially not this season. But he does have some decent skills that got him to the UFC and helped him sustain a career there. Sure, he has a simple style, and against a guy like Almeida, who's a little bit wild and is making it a jump in competition, I see Trizano getting the win here. Keeping the statistic that we were talking about before with fighters making their UFC debut or not winning. I think Trizano is going to stick to his bread and butter, the simple stuff, defend and counter a lot of the crazier things that Lucas Almeida throws at him. Probably winning this one by decision. What do you got for us here, Tom?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, in the previous one, we were talking about Karine Silva being the UFC newcomer, getting, kind of breaking the mold a little bit, getting her win. I think we also see the same thing with Lucas Almeida. However, I'm much less confident this go round for this fight for him. Like you said, Mike Trizano has been in the UFC. He's kind of one of those guys who's well-rounded and doesn't really specialize in any area, which sometimes can actually bite you in the butt because you're not overly confident in any area. If you're a guy like Izzy Adesanya, when the fight is standing, you're like, all right, cool, I'm in my comfort zone, and you can kind of just vibe. Or if you're a guy like we just talked about, Joe Solecki, Charles DuBronx Oliveira, when the fight is on the ground, you're like, all right, now we're in my world. When you're too well-rounded, sometimes you don't feel overly comfortable in any one particular area, and that could ultimately end up being the downfall for Mike Trizano. Almeida has the ability to finish. He does it often. I think he fights at 155. He's fought at 165. It's a catch weight. Now they're doing 145. So that cut may definitely have some impact on how he does, how he looks, his explosive ability, and potentially his chin here. But like I said, Mike Trizano is not a guy who typically we know to come out there and scorch and knock people out, in the first round. So hopefully that's not too big of a problem or an obstacle for Lucas Almeida here. Trizano has been subbed before. He's coming off a beating against Hakeem Dawodu. He was choked out by Grant Dawson, who has since cooled off. Grant Dawson, his most recent win, I think he's had a split win over Luis Pena, whose most recent win is over women he's been beating up lately. I think there's 2 or 3 counts of him beating up women. And I think he's got a fight coming up soon too. So Lucas Almeida, I think he's got a lot of hype behind him. He's got a lot of momentum right now. Trizano isn't too crazy or explosive. Almeida, he has 100% finish rate, just like the other newcomer we talked about and picked here. So I'm going to go, I think both of those newcomers with 100% finish rates are going to get the win. A little tip for you, Lucas Almeida made a guy quit on the stool.
Wow. That's always fun to see.
I think I know what video you're talking about. He wanted to quit, and then his coaches were trying to get him back in, and then the doctor came over. Is that the one?
Is it
in the UFC?
Yeah. The doctor came over and do you want to fight? He's like, no. And he's like, yeah, come on, you want to fight? He's like, nah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Wow, okay. Yeah, so like I said before, like I told you guys before, I didn't have a lot of time to research these guys, and I do my research before I make my picks. So I'm just going off of what you guys are saying, and it sounds like you guys did your research. So I'm going to have to go with Lucas Almeida for this one. And
well, that's the beauty of the show is that, me and Keith will do the research, we'll do the banter, and then, the third man in the hot seat can kind of go. That's actually when we first started this. Shout out Adam AG. He was kind of the third guy in the hot seat. Didn't have too much. I mean, this doesn't apply to you, but he didn't have too much or really any MMA knowledge. So me and Keith would just kind of banter back and forth, and then Adam would pick who had the better argument. And then eventually we were like, well, sorry, Adam, but we don't really need you anymore. So now we have bunch of different people coming in, sitting in that hot seat, varying from, friends who are girls who have no idea, barely even watched a fight, all the way up to some professional and amateur fighters come and sit here. So you really get the full gamut when you come and watch picking fights. Keith, do you want to help us and move on to the next fight here? Our co-main?
Absolutely. So we're up onto the co-main event, and that is Dan 50K Ige versus Movsar Evloev. And, whopping odds in this one. Plus 310 underdog for Dan Ige, a guy that we've seen, put on some great performances in the UFC. And, minus 400 for Evloev, who is a really promising up-and-comer. And I'm rolling with Evloev here, and that's because there's a few things that I noticed from Dan Ige going back and watching his previous fights, most importantly against the Korean Zombie. And that's because the Korean Zombie was able to control Dan Ige on the ground and keep him in vulnerable positions. And the Korean Zombie isn't really a guy that's like, he's got decent grappling and decent wrestling, but he's not known for that. We all know what the Korean Zombie is known for, walking guys down and getting demolished by Alexander Volkanovski. But Evloev is a great wrestler. And as soon as he achieves a takedown on Dan 50K, he's going to do the same thing that Korean Zombie did against Dan Ige. He's going to do the same thing to him on Saturday. So maybe Dan Ige lands a couple of good shots, but as soon as Evloev gets his hands wrapped around Ige, whether it be he gets him around his seatbelt, goes for a double leg, single leg, whatever it is, I mean, the round might as well be over because it's going to be top control from Movsar Evloev for the rest of that round. Ige won't be getting back up until the bell rings. Evloev does go for, submissions. He does look to land punches from the top. But, Dan Ige, he's not terrible on the ground. It's just Evloev is so much better. So I think Evloev is going to win by decision.
Who did he beat? Who did he beat? Evloev. Has he beat anybody notable in the UFC?
He beat Hakeem Dawodu, a guy we were just talking about.
Nick Lentz. Yeah.
Mike Grundy.
I do like Dawodu.
Sungwoo
Choi.
Yep. Yeah, he does have some solid wins. This is a little bit of a step in competition for him, but I mean, he does. It's just his wrestling is so good, and he's undefeated. Just mainly decision wins, but we've seen this out of these Russian wrestlers before. I believe he's Russian. Yep. These guys they just get on top of you, control you for a whole 5 minutes, and I don't know if Evloev has actually ever lost a round on the judges' scorecards before. So, he does cut a lot of weight to, get down to, was it featherweight, bantamweight? Yeah, he does get 25. He does cut a lot of weight to get down to featherweight. So maybe he could be a little bit chinny if Dan Ige does land a big shot on him. But, he doesn't really have a lot of damage to his chin. His chin's not super worn down over his career. So I really just see this being an Evloev win, a very dominant Evloev win on Saturday. What do you think, Tom?
Well, yeah, and I think it's interesting. Some people at home may go, what do you mean the Korean Zombie, Chan Sung-jung, the guy with one of only 2 twists in the UFC, isn't a good grappler? Well, he got that over Leonard Garcia, who is an awful grappler. So, you can't really count the Korean Zombie as a great grappler, even though he's got one of the hardest to achieve submissions in the UFC. Trying to remember. Oh, here was my other thing I was going to say, and as it relates to Evloev, was that when I have a couple rules that I like to live by. That one, women's MMA, generally speaking, is going to go to decision, and you can hammer that unless I tell you otherwise. I wouldn't be particularly confident in taking the Botelho Karine Silva to go to decision when the one woman has 14 wins and 14 finishes. But generally speaking, that's not the case. So women's MMA, a lot of the time, goes to decision. The other one is that siblings inside the UFC cannot be good at the same time. It rarely ever happens, and I'm rarely ever proved wrong. I think I'm ready to make a third. And that's if a guy is Russian, his name ends in a V, and he's got submissions on his record, I'm willing to say that he is probably a phenomenal grappler, and he's undefeated. He's probably going to be able to get somebody to the ground, generally speaking, even if he's going to take a step up in competition. And in this particular case, he's taking a step up to a guy in Dan Ige who's a competent grappler, but that's not his bread and butter. His bread and butter is standing. He's good at that, but Dan Ige's biggest attribute is the fact that he's tough and that he just walks through punches and that he's just willing to take a beating. And the problem with that is that every chin goes at a certain point. I'm looking at you, Max Holloway, as much as it pains me to say that. Max Holloway is a guy who's known to have a great chin. He's going up against Alexander Volkanovski. Is that next weekend?
July 2nd, I believe.
Okay, so I was off by an entire month.
Yeah,
not
next
too far.
Singapore.
Yeah. All right. Well, either way, still little concern for Max Holloway in that fight with how good Alexander Volkov is looking, and we've seen a lot of chins get cracked recently. That being said, like, listen, I like Dan Ige a lot. I just don't think this is a good matchup for him, and I think that plus 400 line for Movsar Evloev is pretty spot on. I mean, maybe it's a little bit egregious, but not by much. Ige's tough, but his chin can go soon, like I said, from those wards. Aside from being, he was held down, like you said, Keith, by the Korean zombie. So now you're going to have a guy, Movsar Evloev, who's just very adept in that sphere. He's been out-grappled like guys like Bektic too. And, not even people like super adept on the ground. So I'm really concerned about Dan Ige and when he goes up against a grappler, especially one from Russia whose last name ends with a V. The only other thing I would say is if their first name and their last name are eerily similar, they're probably a phenomenal grappler. Ige's not much of a finisher either. Evloev is a hot up-and-comer. He's really he was scheduled against Ilia Topuria, which ended up not happening, which I think Ilia Topuria at this point is probably a little bit of a step above Dan Ige. So taking a little bit of a step back in terms of who his opponent's going to be. I really like Movsar a lot in this, and I would be tempted to call him a lock. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, this fight just sounds like one of the fight on the card that I'm just not looking forward to watching because I think you guys are absolutely right about this. What's his name? Evloev?
Movsar Evloev.
Movsar Evloev. So I really like Dan Ige. And like you said, he puts on a lot of good fights. He's tough. His losses are to guys like Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie. But he's you look at his record, he's just a really tough brawler type, and going against this Russian guy who's just going to take him down and hold him there and just kind of have his way with him. Keith, you were saying that we don't know if he ever lost a round in his career.
Right.
Well, right. So, yeah, it's just going to be – I'm going to have to go with Evloev on this one, and I'm sad to say that because I like Dan Ige a lot.
Yeah, it is tough. Dan Ige is a little bit of a fan favorite, and I think that's why they're putting Evloev in this fight, to really just – they build your heroes up and then they tear them down. Yeah. So next up, we've got the main event. Nice little 5-rounder. Was rescheduled from like 2 weeks ago, and that is Alexander Volkov versus Jarzhino Rozenstruik. And I'm going with a little bit of a contrarian pick here. I said that a little weird. A little bit of a contrarian pick here. And I'm going with Biggie Boy, Jarzhino Rozenstruik. And, it's something that we have noticed and taken note of throughout his career, Tom and I over here. And that is that Biggie Boy is a win-loss fighter recently. He just lost to Curtis Blades after a win against Augusto Sakai, after a loss to Cyril Gane, after a win to Junior Dos Santos, after a loss to Francis Ngannou, and then before that, a pretty decent streak of W's. But I think this could be a really good fight for Jarzhino Rozenstruik because he is due for a win. If you use that logic, that win-loss streak that he's on. And he just needs to fight his fight. He can't really fight Volkov's fight in this one because we have seen Jarzhino Rozenstruik be aggressive, getting guys' faces like he did against Augusto Sakai. He can't really fight Volkov's fight in this one, which is to try and stand back, pick him apart at range, because Volkov is going to win that fight 9 times out of 10, if he tries to win this by decision for Jarzhino. But we have seen that Volkov, if you get up into his face, as of recently, especially because he is aging a little bit, if you get up in his face, you rush him a little bit, land a couple clean shots on his chin, you can bring him to the ground. We saw that against, when he fought Tom Aspinall. But, and Volkov isn't really a finisher like some of the other heavyweights. Sure, he has wins over, Alistair Overeem, I think, was his most recent knockout. But Overeem was one of the chinnier guys in the heavyweight division when he was there. But more likely for Volkov is just to try and pick guys apart at range. A lot of front kicks to the body, those stabbing front kicks. So I think if Jarzhino doesn't get wimpy in this one and try to win by points, if he goes for the finish against Volkov, then he has a really good chance to win. When he gets in there and he rushes guys, he does have power because Biggie Boy he's a big fat guy. When he throws his overhand stuff, if it lands clean, he can finish Volkov here. I just think that that's going to be the Jarzhino that we need to see on Saturday. That's the Jarzhino that he needs to be on Saturday. And if he gets that done, then Volkov is going to sleep on Saturday. What do you think about that one, Tom?
Ooh, this is a tough one because I forgot about that. I forgot about that rule, and I didn't realize that by that rule, he is due for a win. But I'm going back and I'm looking, and hopefully I'm not glitching here, but I'm going back and I'm looking at Jarzhino Rozenstruik's record here. His wins inside the UFC, Junior Albini, Alan Crowder, right? Okay, fair enough. Andrei Arlovsky, we still see him getting wins, but he's not getting wins against top-level competition. Let's just be honest here. Andrei Arlovsky is fighting guys who are at the middle to the bottom of the roster. And, hey, listen, he's 41, 42 years old, still going out there and getting wins. It's absolutely phenomenal. He deserves every right to be able to go out there and fight whoever he wants. If that's who wants to fight, great. And but I think at this point in his career, Andrei Arlovsky, he's had enough battles where if he gets hit with a clean hook by somebody who is powerful enough, he's going to go down, right? So then you got the Alistair Overeem win, which Jarzhino Rozenstruik knocked him out with 4 seconds left in the fight, was losing the majority of that fight. By the way, a little bit after that is when Alexander Volkov fought Alistair Overeem and handled him much, much easier. Back to Biggie Boy. He loses to Francis Ngannou. Forgivable. Knocks out Junior Dos Santos. Junior Dos Santos is like 100 at this point. So, I don't know how much I'm going to put stock into that, into Biggie Boy's power. Comes back. He loses Cyril Gane. Fair. Fine. I'll let that one go. He knocks out Augusto Sakai. Another guy. Solid, but he's not top tier, top echelon in the division. Also, his own right has been through a couple battles and a couple wars, and he's getting into the higher end of his age either. Comes back, loses to Curtis Blades, and, he didn't look phenomenal against Curtis Blades. He didn't look terrible. He was kind of middle of the road there. So he had 2 canceled bouts against Marcin Tybura, which I think would have told us a lot about where Jarzhino Biggie Boy Rozenstruik is at this point in his career. The other thing about that, too, is that Rozenstruik, he has only, I think, this will be his, I think, 16th MMA fight, but he's got 85 kickboxing fights, and I think he's 76, 5-1 as far as kickboxing goes. So this is going to be a kickboxing match. The problem is Volkov is much taller. He's got range on him. And Volkov has a lot more MMA experience. I think he's longer. He can grapple a little bit more. So if he's able to get Biggie Boy up against the cage and get him down to the ground, you're going to see Volkov start pocketing rounds here. Now, I know Rozenstruik has a good takedown defense, but Volkov is such a big guy, and especially the new thick Drago Volkov that we're seeing has been able to grapple substantially better than he has earlier in his career. He's kind of reinvented himself a couple times. Back tattoo Volkov, I really like a lot. I think if he can stay on, and the other thing about Rozenstruik is he likes to stay on the outside and be a very patient fighter, but because he's going to have the reach disadvantage here, he is going to have to throw straight punches in order to reach Volkov, and his power shots are really hooks and looping punches. So that creates a little bit of a strategic problem. And then you add into the fact that Volkov is known for his teep kicks, making people actually quit with kicks to the body. I think he's going to be able to use his legs to keep Rozenstruik away from him and then land those long straight punches and kind of keep Rozenstruik back up against the fence like he typically is comfortable being Rozenstruik is in his MMA fights. I think Volkov is going to pocket rounds, and as long as Biggie Boy doesn't land that one fight-ending blow on him, I think Volkov is going to win this one by decision. He's a lot more dynamic in the UFC cage. So for those reasons, I'm leaning towards Alexander Volkov. But like I said, it's a coin flip because if Jarzhino Rozenstruik can find a way to land, Volkov can absolutely go out. And I just want to look up Volkov lately and see, kind of what his chin has looked like. I mean, listen, he lost with an arm lock to Tom Aspinall, which he didn't look great in. But again, Volkov, he's a solid grappler, but nowhere near the level or the echelon or the caliber of fighter that Tom Aspinall is right now in his career. Beat Marcin Tybura, lost to Cyril Gahn, fine. Beat Overeem, kick to the solar plexus. That was the loss to Walt Harris that I was talking about. He lost to Curtis Blades. But again, grappling heavy. He's good against people who don't grapple, but not good against people who do grapple. He's got the win over Greg Hardy. He lost to Derek Lewis late in the third round via punches, but then we have to go all the way back to 2018 to find a loss via TKO for him. So it's not like Alexander Volkov is a guy who has historically had chin issues. He has a little bit of more MMA miles on his face than Jarzhino Rozenstruik does, but I just think when I'm thinking about it, there's a little bit too much hanging in the balance onto the Volkov side for me to pick against him here. What do you think about that one, Shane?
Yeah, you know what? Alexander Volkov is a fighter that I've been following him for a long time, and I like him a lot. And I agree with you when you say it could be a coin flip. Alexander Volkov definitely has the ability to bring these hard hitters to decision. I mean, if you look at the Derek Lewis fight, I mean, that was the last round of that fight, and there was maybe like 10 seconds left in the round, and Derek Lewis lucked out, got that KO. But I mean, we're talking about Derek Lewis, who's just a freak in nature. This is Rozenstruik. I don't think he has the same freak ability as a guy like Derek Lewis. So when it comes to this one, I would say all Alexander Volkov had to do is look at the Gain fight and see how he lost to Gain, and then that's his. He's got the roadmap in there. Whatever he excels at that he can do that what Gain is doing, then he's got it in the bag. I mean, all he has to do is win rounds, like you said. It's a 5-rounder. He's got 5-round experience on his belt. So I'm going to have to go with Volkov on this one.
He's going – look at the Cyril Gain fight, and that's his game plan, would you say?
That is what I said, yeah. And you heard it here first. It's the game plan, yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's time for our pick rundown. So, Keith, if you want to start us off, let me put on the background music, and let's go through our pick rundown.
All right. So, start us off with my prelim locks. I've got Aaron Blanchfield by decision. Jeff Molina. Moving on to the main card, I've got Ode Osbourne. Karine Silva over Poliana Botelho. Mike Trizano over Lucas Almeida. I've got Movsar Evloev over Dan 50K Ige. And I'm taking Jarzhino Rozenstruik to win by knockout. Tom, what do you got?
I like how you did it with the whole announcer style to the beat of the music kind of. I'm going to try and do it too. I got Jeff Molina, El Jefe, over Zaglas Zumagulov. Not Douglas, but Zaglas. I like Damon Jackson to get a win over the rookie at a different weight class in Daniel Argueta. I like Joe Selecki over Alex De Silva. Moving up to the main card, I like Alonzo Menifield over Askar Mozharov, the potential murderer. I like Ode Osbourne, the length machine, at 125 over Zarrukh Adashev. All right, either way. Poliana Botelho, she's going to get a loss against Karine Silva. I think that one's going to be actually by a finish, potentially inside the first round. I'm going with Lucas Almeida, the newcomer, with a 100% finish rate over Mike Trizano. Movsar Evloev, the wrestler from Russia with mostly consonants in his name. I'm picking him over Dan 50K Ige, unfortunately. And I'm going with the crowd. I'm going with Drago. I'm going with back tattoo Volkov to grind out a decision, staying away from Jarzhino, Biggie Boy, Rozenstruik. Over to you, Shane.
Yeah, I'm going with on the undercard. I'm going with Saint Denis because he gave me my extra odds for that Gervonta Davis by KO. Main card, I'm going to go with Alonzo Menifield over Askar Fraud Mozharov. And then moving up, we're going to go Lucas Almeida. You know, I'm just sticking with you guys on that one. He made a guy quit on the stool. Mozharov, mostly consonants, his last name over Ige. Definitely going to be a boring fight. Not looking forward to it. And I'm going to go with my man Volkov, new mythical fighter, back tattoo Volkov. By decision. By decision.
Yeah, that was the one I forgot was Alonzo Menifield. That was the one that I passed over for some reason before. But yeah, I'm going with Alonzo Menifield in that fight as well. So, Tom, when you're compiling our records after this episode, make sure you got that I took Alonzo Menifield too, please. So, thank you, all you kind people at home that tuned into this episode. You know, the couple of you that were in and out, poking in and out. You know, we got a couple of nice comments. One here from our buddy Tyler. We love all the Shades team. Tyler is over there picking winners as well. He covers lacrosse for us and basically went on a tear throughout the entire college lacrosse season, especially the college lacrosse tournament, the May Madness tournament. Called almost every game correctly, spreads, overs, unders. So make sure you're paying attention to what those guys are doing over there, Tyler and Mike, with picking corners. The Pro Lacrosse League season starts up pretty soon. So, yeah, check out Picking Winners, pickingwinners.org, @_Picking Winners on Instagram, Twitter. Follow our Twitters. I'm at Pickin' Keith. At Pickin' Fights Tom is over there in the top right corner, and Shane is at Oddball MMA. Check out everything that we're doing with menoforder.com, everything that Tom does with Overtime Heroics. And, if you follow Shane, you'll be able to see all the stuff that he does too. We expect to have him back some point in the near future. Hopefully, we give him a little bit more time. He has less of a work schedule. And, he can come back with some fire lines and fire takes for us. But tonight was good, and we appreciate you joining us, Shane. So thank you for that.
We got some good cards coming up. And, again, thank you guys for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure for us as well. So please, if you stuck around this long, like this video if you liked it. Subscribe because you have no idea how much it helps us. And comment whatever your thoughts are about our picks down below in the comment section. Thank you, Tom, Shane, all the people at home, and have a great night.